The moment Owen Archer stepped into the courtyard of the Iron Bell Inn and saw the orc woman standing chained to the post at its center, his hand went instinctively to the short bow slung at his shoulder, not to draw it, but to steady himself, the way a man grabs a familiar thing when the world tilts. She was not weeping. She was not crouching. She stood with her back perfectly straight and her chin lifted at an angle that dared anyone in that muddy, torchlit yard to say something worth her time. The shackles at her wrists were heavy iron, and she wore them like jewelry she had not chosen but could not be humiliated by. She was tall, nearly as tall as Owen himself, with dark olive-green skin that caught the orange light of the lanterns and made her look like something hammered out of a different, better metal than the crowd of merchants and wagon drivers gawking at her. Her hair was black as river silt and braided back in 3 thick ropes, threaded with small copper rings that clicked faintly when she turned her head. She wore a fitted warrior's vest of deep brown leather, tooled along the edges with clan marks Owen did not know, laced tight across her chest and shoulders in a way that left her powerful arms bare from the bicep down, and close-fitted riding leathers beneath that disappeared into boots that reached her knee. A single scar ran from her left temple to the corner of her jaw, pale against her skin, shaped like a question the world had asked, and she had answered with force. Lord Fenwick Aldred, who owned the Iron Bell Inn and the surrounding forest that Owen kept, had summoned Owen to the yard with the kind of message that did not explain itself. Come now, bring your bow, say nothing to anyone. Owen was a gamekeeper, not a soldier. His job was the wood, the deer, the snares, the quiet language of tracks and wind. He was 28 and steady-handed and quietly unremarkable, the sort of man who could stand beside a lord's table at a feast and be forgotten inside 10 minutes, not because he was weak, but because he never announced himself. He had a gamekeeper's patience and a gamekeeper's eye, and a conscience that gave him more trouble than it was worth. And right now, that conscience was ringing like a struck blade at the sight of a woman in chains in a public yard. Lord Aldred was beside him inside a breath, a short pink-faced man with ambitious eyes and a traveling merchant's talent for making cruelty sound reasonable. Bagrak Wildheart, Aldred said, nodding toward the woman as though he were presenting livestock. Daughter of the Greenville clan's war chief, or she was until they lost the border dispute. The treaty gives me authority over her as a war bride. She is to be transported to Dunmore Keep within the fortnight, where she will formalize the peace arrangement with Lord Castor's household. Owen stared at him. She is a person. Aldred's expression did not flicker. She is a diplomatic instrument. And she is also, as of this afternoon, a considerable security concern. He lowered his voice. She broke the nose of my head guard when he attempted to search her for weapons. She is not to be unshackled, not to be left unattended, and not to be spoken to more than necessary. Your job, Archer, is to stand at that door, he pointed to the inside passage, and ensure she does not run, does not take a weapon from anyone fool enough to offer her one, and does not kill my remaining guards. Can you manage that? Why me? Owen said genuinely. I keep your forest, I count deer. Because my guards are afraid of her, Aldred said flatly. And you, for reasons I have never fully understood, are afraid of nothing that bleeds. You will also be sleeping in the room beside hers during our stay here. She has agreed to the inn provided she is given a proper room rather than a stable, and I need someone competent to make sure that room stays locked from the outside. He paused. 7 days, Archer. The courier road to Dunmore opens at week's end when the snowmelt clears the Coldthorn Pass. 7 days and she is no longer your concern. He walked away. Owen stood in the muddy yard in the cold spring evening and looked at Bagrak Wildheart, who had turned her gaze from the inn-yard's sorry collection of staring onlookers and was now looking directly at him. Her eyes were a striking, clear amber, nearly the color of good whiskey held to a flame, and they were at the moment carrying approximately the same amount of warmth as bare stone in February. Owen crossed the yard to her. Not quickly, not slowly. He stopped at a distance he would have given any person close enough to speak at a normal volume, far enough to show he was not trying to crowd her. "I am Owen Archer," he said. "I am not a soldier or a guard in the proper sense. I keep Lord Aldred's forest. I track game and manage the wood." He paused. "I have been told to keep you here. I want you to know I am not going to make your life worse than it already is tonight." She looked at him for a long moment that had several layers of assessment in it, the way a hawk looks at something it has not decided about yet. "Gamekeeper," she said. Her voice was low and unexpectedly precise. Her common tongue was accented but fluent. "You count trees and deer." "And poachers," Owen said. "I am very good at knowing when something does not want to be found." Something shifted in her expression, not softening exactly but recalibrating. "Then you will understand," she said, "when I tell you that I will find every weakness in every lock and every wall of this before morning. Not because I intend to run tonight, because I must always know where the door is." "That's a sensible habit," Owen said. She blinked. It was only a small thing, the faintest narrowing and then widening of those amber eyes, but Owen had learned to read the tiny signals of living things, and he read this one clearly. She had expected something else from him. He did not push it. He reached into his coat pocket and held out a key. "Room 4, he said. "End of the upstairs passage. Aldred wants it locked from the outside. I am going to lock it tonight. But here is the other copy." He held it toward her. The chain between her wrists went taut as she reached for it, and she had to take it with both hands together. She closed her fingers around it slowly. "Why?" she said, and it was not quite a question. "Because knowing where the door is seems important to you," he said, "and because a locked room with a key is just a room." He turned and walked to the side passage to take up his post, and behind him, her copper rings clicked once in the still air. That was the first day. The Iron Bell Inn was the largest way station on the trade road between the border counties and the walled market city of Dunmore, and it ran the way all such places ran, loud at mealtimes, loud at night, and full of the ordinary noise of people who all believed their business was the most urgent thing happening within 3 miles. Merchants and their guards ate in the common room. Drovers slept in the stables. Couriers passed through like water, barely stopping long enough to change horses. The innkeeper was a broad-shouldered woman named Marit, who had the gift of making every traveler feel, simultaneously, welcome and watched. Owen's role there over the following days settled into something he had not been trained for and had not entirely expected. He was not a jailer. He was not a handler. He stood at certain positions at certain times, outside her door at night, at the bottom of the yard stairs when Aldred allowed Bagrak an hour of open air each afternoon, and in between he existed in the uncertain middle ground of being neither her enemy nor, as of yet, anything she had decided to trust. She tested him from the very first morning. Day 2 opened with Owen bringing her breakfast on a tray, because Aldred had decided she was not to eat in the common room with the other travelers, and Bagrak answered the door already fully dressed and looked at the tray with the careful assessment of someone who was not going to assume food from a lord's household was safe. "You can watch me eat it first if that would help," Owen said. She watched him. He picked up the bread and bit into it, chewed, swallowed. She picked up the other piece and ate it without another word. But when he turned to go, she said, "The man in room 2, the merchant with the green coat. He was at my clan's border crossing 8 months ago. I know his face." Owen stopped. "Did he do something to you?" "He counted us," she said. "When the treaty was being negotiated, he was one of the men who decided how many of us were worth what. There was nothing Owen could say to fix that. He said nothing for a moment, which she seemed to notice. Then he said, 'I will make sure he does not speak to you.' 'I do not need protection from a merchant,' she said, with a precise edge on the word that meant she wanted him to understand the distinction. 'I know,' he said. 'But I can make it so he does not bother you, and that way I also do not have to explain to Aldred why you broke another guard's nose.' The corner of her mouth moved. It was a minimal thing. He stored it carefully. That afternoon, during her hour in the yard, she stopped in the middle of the space and looked up at the inn's roof line with the stillness of someone calculating. 22 feet to the first overhang, Owen said from where he stood, not looking up. The stable roof is lower, but the drop on the far side is into the midden, and there is a dog that lives under the wagon shed who bites. She turned to look at him. You already mapped this. I map everything, he said. It is the job. Tell me the second exit, she said. It was a challenge, clean and direct. He walked her through it. Not because he was ordered to, not because he thought she would use it, but because she was asking for information she had every right to have about the space she was confined in, and something in him could not justify withholding it from a person being held against her will in someone else's arrangement. He showed her the service door behind the kitchen that opened to the river path, and the low window in the back passage that the kitchen staff used to pass things out to the yard, and the gap in the eastern fence where the planks had rotted and no one had fixed them. She listened with the absolute cataloging attention of someone who had been trained since childhood to retain tactical information. When he finished, she said, "You are either very trusting or very bad at your job." "I am trusting when it seems like the right call," he said, "and I am still here, so I think I am all right at the job." She walked back toward the inn without another word, but she walked at his pace rather than pulling ahead, and Owen noticed. On the third day, the test got harder. He heard it before he saw it, raised voices in the common room mid-afternoon, a specific pattern of escalation that a man who had spent years tracking and managing the forest learned to read in human spaces too. By the time he pushed through the common room door, 3 of Aldred's traveling guards and one of the drovers were positioned in a loose, unpleasant geometry around Bagrak, who had come downstairs for water and found herself surrounded. She was not afraid. She was standing in the center of it with her arms at her sides and her eyes moving between them with the flat assessment of someone taking stock before a storm. The shackles were off. Aldred had allowed her freedom of movement indoors during daylight, on Owen's quiet recommendation, and the biggest of the guards had noticed and had apparently decided this was a problem worth loudness about. "No chain on her," he was saying. "That's a war orc in our common room, free as you please, while decent people are trying to eat." Owen walked in and stood between the guard and Bagrak without drama or announcement. He simply occupied the space, his bow on his back and his hands open, and he looked at the guard with the perfectly patient expression of someone who is waiting to find out whether this is going to be a conversation or something else. "Move, gamekeeper," the guard said. "This is above your station." "Lord Aldred placed her under my management," Owen said calmly. "That makes this exactly my station. She is going to get her water. You are going to finish your meal." "She is an orc." "Yes," Owen said, and he said it in the same voice he used for everything, with the same weight, as though the man had said something so obvious it barely warranted acknowledgement. "And Lord Aldred's treaty obligation. If you damage his treaty obligation, that is a very different conversation than the one you are trying to start. I suggest the meal." The standoff held for about 4 seconds. Then the guard stepped back with the particular injured dignity of a man who has decided to be aggrieved later. The drover drifted away. The room rearranged itself around the absence of conflict. Owen picked up a water jug from the bar and handed it to Bagrak. She took it. Her eyes, over the rim when she drank, were watching him with that recalibrating look again. He walked her back toward the stairs. Halfway up, she said, very quietly, "You did not call me dangerous." "You are not dangerous to me," he said, equally quiet, "so it would not have been accurate." She stopped on the landing. He stopped a step below her, which put them at nearly the same height. The afternoon light came through the narrow window and made the copper rings in her hair glow. "Why not?" she said. "I broke a man's nose 2 days ago." "He tried to search you like you were cargo," Owen said. "I am not going to do that." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned and went to her room, and the door closed, and Owen stood on the landing in the quiet and wondered what exactly he was doing with the strange, steady warmth he felt in his chest. On the 4th day, she started asking him questions. They came out sideways, the way questions come from people who are testing whether honesty is a trap or a gift. She asked about the forest he kept. He told her about it. "The old growth stands in the north quarter. the deer paths he had been walking since he was 16 and his uncle first took him on rounds, the way the wood changed season to season and how after 10 years he could tell the time of year by smell alone. She listened without comment, but she listened the way she had listened to the exit mapping, with her full attention. Then she said, "Do you poach from your own lord's forest?" Owen paused. "Why would you ask that?" "Because you told me last night that you sometimes eat venison in your room," she said, "and the meat ration for staff here does not include deer." He looked at her. She looked back, amber eyes level. He almost laughed, and the almost laugh did something honest to his face. "Occasionally," he said, "when the herd is strong enough to spare it and the winter has been long." "You break the rule when the rule is wrong," she said. "I bend it," he said, carefully. "The difference matters to you." "It matters," he said. She nodded slowly, the way someone nods when a piece of information has been filed in the correct drawer. Then she said, "My clan's law says the same thing. A rule that starves the people it is meant to protect is no longer a rule. It is a weapon aimed in the wrong direction." They were sitting at the small table by her window. She had asked him to come in, for the first time, because she said she was tired of talking through a door frame, and the late afternoon was gold and cold outside. Owen leaned back in his chair and looked at the ceiling for a moment, because she had said something that touched a place he had not expected to reach. "I grew up on the south side of this forest," he said. "My father's family farmed the edge of it. When the harvests were bad, people poached. The old lord before Aldred had men hanged for it." He paused. "I became a gamekeeper partly because I wanted to be the person who could tell the difference between a man feeding his family and a man stripping the wood bare. I'm not always sure Aldred sees that distinction." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "In my clan, the gamekeeper role is given to the oldest woman of the hunting line. She decides what may be taken and what may not. The men argue with her sometimes. She is always right." "That sounds efficient," Owen said. "She is terrifying," Bagrak said. And this time, what moved at the corner of her mouth was unmistakably a smile. It lasted only a second, but it changed her whole face, and Owen felt the breath leave his lungs in a way that had nothing to do with surprise. He picked up his cup and drank from it and looked at the table, and was careful not to make anything of it. That night, he heard her moving in her room, not the restless pacing he had heard the first 2 nights, but something else, a deliberate low sound like someone practicing something with their hands in the dark. In the morning, he found a small carving on the windowsill of the landing, cut from a piece of wood he recognized as a broken spoke from the yard's wagon rack. It was a deer, rough but accurate, maybe 3 inches tall. Its legs were planted. Its head was lifted. He picked it up and carried it with him all day. Day 5 arrived with a problem he had not foreseen. A courier came in on the morning road with a sealed letter for Lord Aldred, and Owen was close enough to the common room entrance to see the Lord's face when he broke the seal. Aldred had a politician's face, trained to give nothing away, and he gave almost nothing, but Owen read the tightening around his eyes and the way his hand moved to set the letter down too carefully, and he knew. He found out the details in the early afternoon when Aldred summoned him to his private sitting room. "There has been a complication," Aldred said. Poured wine he did not offer to share. "Bagrak's clan has sent a ransom demand to Dunmore. They are offering Lord Castor the full return of the disputed border territory, 200 heads of the clan's best cattle, and a season's worth of ironwork from the Greenville forges." He paused. "In exchange for her." Owen's chest went still and cold. "They want her back. They want her back badly enough to offer Castor more than the treaty itself is worth," Aldred said. "Castor is considering it. His response will reach me by the end of the week." He swirled the wine. "If he accepts, she is returned to her clan and the war bride arrangement is dissolved. If he refuses, we proceed as planned." "And if the clan decides not to wait for the answer?" Owen said. Aldred looked at him. "That is why I need you sharp, Archer. I have word that her clan has riders on the trade road. The ransom demand was sent legally, through treaty channels, but the Greenville clan has never been known for patience." He set down his cup. Your job just became considerably more important. She is not to be left unsupervised at any point. I do not want a clan extraction, and I do not want her hurt by my own people acting out of fear. Keep the balance." Owen walked out of that room with his jaw tight and a feeling in his stomach like cold river water rising. He went to her door and knocked. When she answered, he looked at her and said, "Your clan sent a ransom demand to Lord Castor." The stillness that moved through her was not surprise. It was something else, something careful and layered, and too complicated to read in a single glance. "Sit down," she said, and stepped back from the door. He went in and sat in the same chair by the window. She stood. The afternoon light fell across her and she looked out at the road and was quiet for a long moment. "My father's war chief name is Bagrak Wildheart," she said finally. "He is the most stubborn man in 3 counties of clan territory. When I was taken under the treaty terms, I told him, 'Do not bleed for me.' The treaty is bigger than one person. He heard me." She paused. "And then he did this anyway." "He loves you," Owen said. "He is going to start a war," she said, with a heat in her voice that was equal parts love and fury and something underneath that might have been overwhelmed. "Not if Castor takes the deal," Owen said. "Land and cattle for a diplomatic formality. Castor is greedy enough to see the math. And if he does not take the deal," she said, "my clan will send riders. They may already have. I know." She turned from the window and looked at him directly. "You are not afraid." "I am," he said honestly, "but not of your clan." She narrowed her eyes fractionally. "What then?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I am afraid of a situation I cannot manage cleanly, of something going wrong fast in a way that hurts someone I would not want hurt." The room was very quiet. The copper rings in her hair did not move. "You have been keeping me," she said slowly, "for 5 days. In that time you have given me a key I did not have to ask for, showed me every exit in this building, stood between me and 3 men in a common room, told me the truth about your own law-breaking, and now you have come to me with information Aldred did not tell you to share." She studied him. "Why?" Owen looked at his hands. "Because you are a person," he said. "And this situation is wrong, and I cannot fix the large wrong, but I can manage the small wrongs inside my reach." She crossed the space between them in 3 steps and crouched to his eye level, which put her closer than she had been to him since the courtyard on the first night. Her eyes were very clear and very direct. "You are a strange man, Owen Archer." "I've been told," he said. "I mean it as," she seemed to search for the word, "as something good." They were close enough that he could see the grain of that pale scar at her temple, and the small calluses on her hands from bowstring and blade, and the way her expression had shifted into something that was neither assessment nor challenge but a third thing, quieter and warmer, that he was not sure he was reading correctly and was afraid to trust. He did not move. He let her look at him. After a moment she stood. "Tell me if Castor's answer comes," she said, "before Aldred tells anyone else." "Yes," he said. He left. Out on the landing, he pressed his back to the wall for a moment and breathed. The carved deer was in his coat pocket. He could feel it against his ribs. Day 6 was the one that changed everything, and it began in the worst possible way. Owen had developed the habit of walking the inn's perimeter before dawn. It was a gamekeeper's instinct, a need to know what the dark had done with the territory while he slept. He was in the south yard at first gray light, moving quietly along the fence line, when he heard voices at the gap in the eastern, planks the one he had shown Bagrak on day 2. 3 men speaking low in the Greenville clan's trade tongue, which Owen knew enough of to follow the shape of. He pressed himself against the fence and listened, and what he heard was the word for tonight repeated twice, and the word for the back gate, and a name that sounded like a high clan honorific when applied to Bagrak. He counted to 30 after the voices faded. Then he went inside and straight to her door and knocked in the pattern he had told her was his own 212, and when she opened it he said, "Riders, tonight, your clan." She was already dressed. She had, he thought, slept in her clothes. She looked at him with sharp, immediate attention. "How many?" 3 I heard, more I do not know. "They will not hurt me," she said. "They are here to take me." "I know," he paused. "Do you want to go?" The question landed in the room and neither of them breathed for a second. "If I go," she said quietly, "my clan returns home, my father avoids a war, and I spend the rest of my life in my own territory with the knowledge that the treaty held." She stopped. "If I go with Castor's men to Dunmore, I spend my life in a house where I am a diplomatic formality and my father bleeds trying to buy me back." "And if you stay here tonight," Owen said, "I keep you and we wait for Castor's answer, and there is a chance the ransom is accepted and you go home legally, with the treaty intact and your clan's land returned." She looked at him. "You are offering me a third path." "I am offering you information," he said carefully. "The choice is yours." She studied him for a long time. Outside, the sky was going from gray to the pale, cold blue that meant an hour before full light. "If I stay," she said, "my clan's riders will not go home quietly. They will escalate, and your lord will blame you." "He will," Owen agreed. "You would take that risk." "I would manage it," he said. "There is a difference." The corner of her mouth pulled again. Not a small thing this time. A full, real, complicated smile that was warm and pained, and somehow more honest than anything he had seen on a human face in years. "You sound like a Greenville elder when you say things like that," she said. "I will take that as a compliment. It is one." She made her decision in the next breath, the way she seemed to make all decisions, not slowly, not agonizing, but cleanly. "I stay," she said. "And tonight when your lord's guards challenge the riders, you are going to need to be the voice in the middle again. Can you do that without a fight starting?" "I can try," he said. "I am better at reading situations than starting them." "Good," she said, "because if a fight starts, I will finish it and that will make everything worse." He almost laughed. The moment between them was close and warm and real, and he was entirely aware of how close she was standing, and entirely aware that he needed to move before he said something or did something that was not his right, and so he stepped back toward the door. "Owen," she said. He stopped. "I noticed the carving was gone from the windowsill," she said. "You took it." He reached into his coat pocket, wrapped his fingers around the small wooden deer. "Yes," he said. She held his gaze for one long beat. "Good," she said again, softer. Then she went to the window and looked out at the lightening yard, and he went downstairs to make a plan. The events of that night happened faster than plans usually survived. Owen spent the day managing pieces. He found Aldred mid-morning and reported the overheard voices without giving the full detail enough to raise alert, not enough to trigger a crackdown that would lock Bagrak in her room under heavy guard. He suggested doubling the yard watch on the east side and moving 2 guards to the stable road, framing it as precaution against opportunistic theft by road travelers, which was common enough that Aldred accepted it without too many questions. He walked the perimeter twice more during daylight and found the marks of horses on the soft ground outside the east fence, 3 animals, close grouped, patient, waiting. In the late afternoon, he brought Bagrak a meal himself and sat with her while she ate, and they talked about the forest because it seemed like the right thing to talk about when neither of them wanted to name what was building in the dark outside the window. She told him about the Greenville clan's territory, a wide lowland valley with a river that ran green in summer from the mineral deposits upstream, which was where the clan name came from. She had grown up running the valley's edge. "What did you do before the border dispute?" he asked. "I was my father's second," she said. His voice in counsel when he needed someone who would fight the room instead of agree with it. She paused. "He trusts me more than anyone. That is why giving me over to a treaty hurt him the way it did. He knew I would go without breaking the clan's word, and I knew he would spend every breath trying to get me back." "He sounds like a man worth having in your corner," Owen said. "He is terrifying and stubborn, and he loves his people more than he loves air," she said, and the warmth in her voice when she spoke about him was the clearest thing Owen had heard her express. "He would have liked you." The would have landed oddly, present tense shaped but past tense pointed, and Owen sat with it for a moment. "You say that like it is already decided," he said. She looked at him over the rim of her cup. "Is it not?" He did not answer because he genuinely did not know what answer was true, and because the candlelight in that small room was doing something to the moment that made it important enough to be careful with. At midnight, the east fence gave with a crack of rotten wood, and 3 riders came into the yard in a low, fast crouch, leaving their horses outside. They were large clan warriors in the patterned riding leathers of the Greenville, and they moved with practiced silence toward the inn's back door. They made it about halfway across the yard before Owen stepped out of the kitchen doorway into their path. He did not have his bow in hand. He stood with his hands visible, his lantern held out to one side, and said, in his best approximation of the Greenville trade tongue, "I would like to speak before this becomes something everyone regrets." The riders stopped. The largest of the 3, a broad, scarred man with the silvering markings of a senior warrior, looked at Owen with the expression of a man deciding whether this human was an obstacle or an annoyance. "You are the keeper," the warrior said, in common tongue surprisingly clear. "The one who guards her." "I am," Owen said, "and I am here to tell you that Lord Castor's answer is expected in 2 days. If the ransom is accepted, the land, the cattle, the ironwork, she goes home legally, the treaty holds, and your clan's borders are secured permanently instead of provisionally. If you take her tonight, the treaty is void, and Castor has justification to take back everything he offered." The warrior was quiet. Behind Owen, he heard the back door open. He had not heard Bagrak come down the stairs, but she was there, and her voice came over his shoulder, low and clear and absolutely steady. "Marak," she said. "He is right. Stand down." The warrior named Marak looked past Owen at Bagrak, and his face did something complicated: relief and anguish, and the face of a man who has been carrying a mission for weeks and just had it taken from him by the woman he came to rescue. "Your father," he started. "My father will have me back in 2 days if Castor is as greedy as I think he is," Bagrak said. "And if not, we will have a different conversation. But not tonight, Marak." "Not like this." A long pause. Then Marak made a short, clipped gesture with his hand, the signal Owen had seen clan riders use to stand a unit down, and the other 2 men stepped back. 2 days, Marak said, looking at Owen. 2 days, Owen confirmed. They went back through the fence. Owen let out a breath that seemed to have been held since midnight. Aldred's guards, posted on the wrong side of the yard exactly as Owen had arranged, had heard nothing. He turned around. Bagrak was standing in the doorway in the dark, her arms crossed over her chest, looking at him with an expression he could not categorize, because he had not seen it on her face before. It was wide-eyed and very still, and it was not the assessment look or the challenge look or even the warm, complicated smile. It was something rower than all of those. "You learned our tongue," she said, "enough to open the conversation." "I picked up pieces," he said. "I was not sure it would work." "How long have you been planning that?" "Since this morning," he said. "Roughly." She crossed the yard to him in 4 long, decisive strides and stopped close, very close, the way she had crouched to his eye level in the room. Except this time, there was nothing careful or measured about her distance, and the copper rings in her hair caught the lantern light, and her eyes were very bright and direct. "That was the bravest foolish thing I have watched anyone do in 6 years of watching men do things in war yards," she said, and her voice was rough with something she was clearly not used to letting into her voice. "Was it foolish?" Owen asked. He was very aware of the warmth radiating from her in the cool night air. "Extremely," she said, "and it worked, which makes it worse." "Worse how?" She looked at him for one suspended, breath-held moment. Then she reached up and put one hand against the side of his face, her palm warm and rough from the calluses, her fingers curling slightly at his jaw, and she kissed him. It was not a tentative thing. Bagrak Wildheart did not do tentative. It was direct and certain and warm and tasted of the spiced evening tea Marat's kitchen made. And Owen's free hand found her shoulder and his fingers closed against the tooled leather, and he kissed her back with the same honesty that she had put into it, because it was the only honest response. When they separated, the yard was very quiet and very dark and very cold, and neither of them had anything immediate to say, and Owen became aware that he was holding the lantern at a completely useless angle and had been for some time. "I have been considering that for 4 days," she said. "I have been considering it for 5, he said honestly. She made a sound short and low and warm that might have been a laugh in a different moment. "Get some sleep, Owen Archer," she said. "Tomorrow I am going to be in a terrible mood waiting for a courier's answer, and you will need your patience." "I have an abundance," he said. "I know," she said almost quietly. "That is one of the reasons." She went inside. Owen stood in the yard for another minute, holding his lantern, listening to the absolute silence of a night that had managed, against several odds, not to fall apart. He was smiling. He did not entirely know when he had started. Day 7 came in on a cold, bright morning with a hard edge of wind off the pass and a courier's horse in the yard before most of the inn's guests were awake. Owen heard the horse and was dressed and downstairs before the courier had finished handing over his letter bag to Merritt's boy. He saw Aldred emerge from his rooms in a dressing gown, crack the sealed letter with the Castor household wax in the passage outside the common room, and read it. Then Aldred stood very still for approximately 10 seconds with the letter in both hands and the expression of a man recalculating something significant. He looked up and found Owen standing in the passage, and did not seem surprised. "Castor accepted the ransom," Aldred said. "Land, cattle, ironwork. The Warbride arrangement is formally dissolved. Bagrak Wildheart is to be returned to her clan's custody under treaty terms by end of the week." Owen held himself very still. "That is the better outcome," he said. "For the treaty." "Yes," Aldred said. He looked at Owen for a moment with his ambassador's eyes, the ones that were always reading the room behind the room. "She is to be released this morning. Her clan's riders will be sent word through the county messenger." He folded the letter. "I also received a secondary note from Castor's secretary which informs me that the Greenville war chief specifically requested that the release be arranged by the man who kept her. Apparently his riders sent back a report." He paused. "That would be you." "It would," Owen said. Aldred looked at him a moment longer. "You are a peculiar man, Archer." "I mean that as neither criticism nor compliment, simply as observation." He walked away toward his rooms. "Tell her," he called back, without turning around. Owen took the stairs 2 at a time. He knocked 212, and when the door opened she was already dressed, already straight-backed and clear-eyed, and she looked at his face and read it before he said anything. "Castor accepted," she said. "He did." Owen paused. "You are free. Your clan's riders will be sent word this morning. You can leave by midday." She nodded. Something in her expression moved in a direction that was not what he had expected, not only relief, not only triumph, something more complicated. "Come in," she said. He went in. She went to the window and looked out at the yard where the courier's horse was being watered, and the morning was doing its sharp-edged best across the frost-pale grass. "Owen," she said. "Yes." "When I leave here today," she stopped, turned to face him. "What is your plan?" "Go back to my forest," he said. "Count my deer. Manage Aldred's wood until he replaces me or I age out of it." She looked at him very directly. "That is a small life for a man who talked 3 Greenville riders down in a yard in the dark." He was quiet for a moment. "It is the life I have," he said. "I do not say that with self-pity, I mean it plainly." "I know you do," she said. She crossed the room toward him, and he had learned her movement over 7 days, and he knew this one was deliberate, and he stood still and let her come. "That is one of the things I have decided about you," she continued. "You are plain, not in a diminished sense, in the way that a thing is plain when it does not need decoration because it is exactly what it appears to be, and that is already enough." He looked at her. The amber of her eyes in the morning light was warmer than it had ever looked in the lantern glow, like the inside of something living and lit. "What have you decided?" he said. "All of it." "That you are kind in a way that is not weakness," she said. "That you are brave in a way that does not announce itself, which is the rarest kind. That you gave me a key and showed me the exits and stood between me and 3 men without making it about yourself, and that you held a wooden deer carving in your coat pocket for 3 days without saying a word about it." She paused, And that when I kissed you last night, you kissed me back the same way I kissed you, which tells me you meant it." "I meant it," he said, with no hesitation at all. She lifted one hand and pressed it flat against his chest, over the pocket where the carving was, and he could feel the warmth of her hand through the wool of his coat. "My clan's territory is 20 miles east of the Coldthorn Pass," she said. "The valley with the Green River. My father is going to throw a feast when I come home, and he is going to ask me exactly once who I wish to sit beside, and then he will never ask again because Bagrak Wildheart does not repeat himself." Owen was very still. "You are saying something very specific," he said. "I am not good at saying things small," she said, which was absolutely true. "So I will say it large. Come with me." The word settled into the room with complete simplicity, the way large things sometimes have a simple shape. Owen looked at her hand on his chest and then at her face, and the entirety of the life he was being invited toward the Green Valley, the clan table, the Orc war chief's stubborn hospitality, and the woman in front of him who had spent a week taking him apart and putting him back together differently opened in front of him like a forest trail he had not known was there. "I will need to give Aldred notice," he said. "A gamekeeper does not simply vanish from a post." "That can be managed," she said. "The pass will be cold. I have been cold before. Your father is going to look at me like I am the smallest creature he has seen in years," Owen said. "He does that to everyone," she said. "He did it to me until I was 17. Then I beat him at axe throwing and he stopped." A pause. "You will be fine." He laughed, and the laugh was real and open and rang in that small room like a bell, and she blinked at it, startled slightly, and then delighted in the way that a person who has been waiting for a particular sound is delighted when it finally comes. He put his hand over hers where it rested on his chest. Her fingers turned and laced through his, which was not a small gesture from her, which they both understood. "Yes," he said, "I will come with you." She exhaled, and in the exhale was something she had been holding since before he could measure. Then she pulled him in by their joined hands and kissed him again, different from the night before, still direct, still honest, but with the particular quality of a thing that is no longer a question. He pulled her close with his free hand, and she came willingly, and the morning light fell across them both, and the copper rings in her hair clicked softly as she moved, and none of it was small. They spent the next 2 hours in the ordered, practical reality of departure. Owen went to Aldred and handed in a formal spoken resignation, the only kind that counted in a lord's household, with enough formal language to make it legal and enough brevity to make it clear he was not asking permission. Aldred received it with the same calculating stillness he received all information, and then said, with a kind of grudging respect Owen had not expected from him, "She is an exceptional woman. Most people who tried to manage her simply survived. You did better than that." "She managed herself," Owen said. "I just stayed out of her way where it mattered." Aldred almost smiled. Then he went back to his letter bag and Owen went back upstairs. Marat and the 2 other riders arrived in the Iron Bell's yard by late morning, having received the county messenger's word at their camp outside the east fence. They came in through the front gate this time, proper and plain in the daylight, horses stamping in the cold air. Marat was a head taller than Owen and looked at him with the expression of a man who is recalibrating something. "You are the voice from the yard," he said in common tongue. "I am," Owen said. Marat looked at him for a long moment. Then he made the same stand-down gesture he had made the night before, but this time it was aimed at his own posture, a deliberate release of formality. "The chief's daughter speaks well of you," he said. "In the report, that is significant. I hope it remains significant when she speaks to her father in person," Owen said. "He will eat you alive," Marat said pleasantly. "Then he will decide you are acceptable. It is his process. He went to take the horses' leads." Bagrak came out of the inside door with her travel packs, small, military, everything she had come with plus the key Owen had given her on the first night, which she had put on a cord around her neck. She stopped in the doorway and looked at Owen standing in the yard with his own pack at his feet and his bow on his back, and the look on her face was the warm open one, the one she had stopped trying to conceal sometime around day 5. "Ready?" she said. "As I know how to be," he said. Marat looked between them with the resigned tolerance of a man who has ridden a long way and is now going to ride it back with unexpected complications. But he said nothing, and the other 2 riders also said nothing, and that was the Greenville way of accepting a situation. The road east was wide and cold, and cut through terrain Owen had not seen before, the game country east of Aldred's forest, where the deciduous wood gave way to open rolling moorland, and then to the close, dark pine stands that marked the foothills of the Coldthorn Range. Owen rode a horse Aldred had, with surprising generosity, allowed him to take a solid bay with an indifferent personality, ideal for long roads. Bagrak rode beside him rather than with her clan's riders, which was noted by everyone and commented on by no one. They talked through the first stretch of road while the morning burned off, and the day settled into the particular clear cold of late spring in the hills. She told him about the valley, the ironworks her clan ran on the river's eastern bend, the great feast house where Bagrak Wildheart presided over his people's arguments and celebrations with equal authority, the herb garden plots her mother had planted before she died and that Bagrak had kept alive as a private discipline in the years since. "You garden," Owen said. "I garden," she confirmed, with the mild defiance of someone who has had to defend this fact before. "What do you grow?" "Mostly medicines," she said. "Some things for the kitchen. My mother knew the old plant knowledge, the kind passed down from the early clan healers. She taught me before," she paused briefly, "before the fever took her 6 years back." Owen was quiet for a moment. "My uncle taught me the wood," he said. "He is gone now too. There are things I do in the forest that are entirely from him, the way I set a snare, the way I read a track line." He looked at the road ahead. "It feels like carrying a conversation with someone who is not there anymore." "Yes," she said, with a soft emphasis that meant she knew exactly. They rode in comfortable quiet after that, which was not the absence of something but the presence of something, the ease of 2 people who have stopped performing for each other. At midday they stopped at a roadside well to water the horses, in a spot where the moor opened up, and you could see the first white peaks of the Coldthorn Range against the sky like a row of held breath. Owen tied his horse and helped Marat with the water buckets, and Bagrak sat on the well's stone edge and looked at the mountains with an expression he was learning to read. Not wistfulness, but the specific look of someone who is weighing the distance between where they are and where they are going and finding it manageable. He sat beside her on the well's edge, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. She did not move away. "He is going to ask you your lineage first," she said without preamble. "My father, before anything else. He wants to know who your people are and what they did and how much of it was worth respecting." "My father was a farmhand on a border estate," Owen said. "His father before him worked the same. My mother's family were boatmen, river trade, nobody notable, several people with admirable stubbornness." "Stubbornness he respects," she said. "The farm and river work he will understand. He started as a hunting party second, nothing more. He built to war chief by outworking every man in the clan for 20 years. She paused. "What he will actually be looking at is whether you hold his eyes when you speak." "I will," Owen said. "I know," she said, and the simplicity of it was the warmest thing she had said to him. He turned his head to look at her profile, the strong line of her jaw, the scar curved at her temple, the copper rings quiet in her braids, and thought that he had spent 28 years being the man nobody at the feast table remembered, and that he had somehow ended up in the warmth of being seen so completely that it almost hurt with how good it felt. "Bagrak," he said. She turned to look at him. He did not have a prepared speech. He was not that kind of man. He had the exact truth and he used it. "I do not entirely understand yet why you picked me, out of everything and everyone. But I am going to spend a very long time being grateful for it, and I want you to know that I do not take it lightly." She looked at him for a long, still moment. The wind moved across the moor, and the mountain peaks were bright in the distance, and Marit was making noise with the water buckets. "I picked you," she said quietly, "because for 7 days the only person in that inn who treated me like I was worth something was the one who had the least to gain from it. Your lord did not ask you to give me that key. The other guards would never have shown me the exits. Nobody told you to learn even a few words of my language. You did all of it because something in you could not do otherwise." She held his gaze. "A woman who has spent her life surrounded by people, deciding what she is worth pays attention when someone simply acts like she is already worth something. You did that from the very first night." Owen did not answer, because there was no answer that would not be smaller than what she had said. He reached over and took her hand, not the way he had taken it inside the inn, not urgent or uncertain but deliberate and quiet, and she let him hold it, and they sat on the stone edge of the well in the wide, cold afternoon, while Marit pretended to be entirely absorbed in the business of horses. The pass was cold but clear, and the road through it was old stone, wide enough for 2 horses abreast, and on the far side the terrain fell away into the green length of valley that Bagrak had described. Owen saw it first as a smear of deeper color against the pale moorland. Then, as the valley opened below them and the river caught the late afternoon sun, and it ran green gold in the light, and he understood the name in a way that description had not quite prepared him for. The Greenville was alive in a way the borderland behind them was not. The valley floor was thick with early spring growth, and the ironworks on the river's eastern bend sent a thin thread of smoke up into the still air. And across the valley's widest point, the clan's main settlement spread in a long, warm sprawl of log-built halls and hide tent outbuildings, and the great feast house at its center, which was the largest wooden structure Owen had ever seen that was not a castle. Marit sent one of the riders ahead as a herald, which Owen gathered was protocol for a returning chief's daughter. By the time they rode down the valley road to the settlement's gate, there was a crowd. Owen had expected to feel small. He felt something different, the very specific, exposing sensation of being seen, which was different from small. The crowd was orc men and women, and the occasional human trader who worked the clan's market, and they were watching Bagrak with the mixed relief and welcome of people who had been waiting and worrying. And they were looking at Owen with the frank, curious assessment of a community examining an unfamiliar thing. He sat straight in his saddle and met the eyes that met his, which seemed to be the right instinct because he saw several nods. Bagrak Wildheart was at the feast house steps. He was immense. Not just in height, though he was enormous, a head above Owen and broader across the shoulders than any 2 of Aldred's guards combined, but in the particular density of presence that some people have, the kind that fills the space around them without effort. He had Bagrak's amber eyes and her jawline, and her way of holding absolutely still when his gaze landed on a thing. His hair was iron gray and his face was a cartography of old battles and harder decisions, and the silver rings in his hair were larger than Bagrak's, each one carved with a mark. He looked at Bagrak first. The look he gave her was not a chief's look. It was a father's. She crossed to him and they clasped forearms in the clan greeting, and he said something to her in Greenville tongue that Owen did not catch, and she answered it, and whatever she said made the enormous man's shoulders come down from where they had been held, high and tight, since Owen first saw him. He had been holding that tension for weeks, Owen realized. He had sent his riders and his ransom and his treaty lands and his ironwork, and it had not been enough to stop the worry, and now she was here and the tension let go. Then Bagrak looked at Owen. Owen dismounted. He did not fumble the landing or hesitate coming down, and he walked forward and stopped at a respectful distance and held the war chief's amber gaze without dropping it. "Owen Archer," Bagrak said. His common tongue was heavier accented than Bagrak's but precise. "War chief," Owen said. Bagrak looked at him for 10 full seconds. It was the kind of deliberate inspection that was meant to be felt. Owen felt it and held his ground. "My daughter's report," Bagrak said, says you showed her the exits. She said she needed to know where the door was, Owen said. It seemed true. It is always true, Bagrak said. He paused. She also says you spoke our trade tongue to my riders in a dark yard. Enough of it, Owen said. The situation called for it. Where did you learn it? From listening, Owen said, and from asking her to correct me when I got it wrong. Another long look. Then Bagrak turned his head slightly toward Bagrak and said in Greenville tongue something that from the words Owen had picked up over 7 days amounted to, he holds his eyes well. And Bagrak, standing slightly to Owen's left, said back clearly for Owen to hear, I told you he would. Bagrak made a sound that might have been approval or might have been the Greenville equivalent of a resigned sigh. Then he said to Owen, you will stay for the feast. I would be honored, Owen said. After the feast, Bagrak said, we will speak about what you are doing in my valley with my daughter. I look forward to it, Owen said, which was not entirely true, but Bagrak's shoulder was warm against his arm where she had moved to stand beside him, and it made most things feel manageable. The feast was enormous and loud and warm and entirely unlike anything Owen had experienced in Aldred's borderland. The feast house could hold the entire settlement comfortably, and it held all of them tonight, orc warriors and craftworkers and traders, and the clan's handful of human-born residents, all at long tables with the communal energy of a people who genuinely celebrated together when they had cause. The food was remarkable, cooked over open hearths in the hall's center, heavy and spiced and abundant. There was a mead that tasted like dark honey and winter berries, and someone produced a stringed instrument the size of a standing man and played it in the hall's corner with a sound that was simultaneously mournful and celebratory. Owen sat beside Bagrak at the table nearest the feast house's head, which was where Bagrak sat, and he understood from the placement, and from the way the clan made casual space for him there, that Bagrak had already communicated something about him before the conversation with her father had even happened. He felt that in the most uncomplicated way, the warmth of being included because she had included him. They ate together, their shoulders touching, and she pointed out people for him, her father's second, a round-faced warrior named Geth who turned out to be hilarious, the ironworks master, a woman of 60 who wore her trade burns like medals, Marat's wife, who was apparently the valley's best tracker and had been furious about being left behind for the extraction mission. Owen listened and asked questions and made Bagrak laugh 3 times over the course of the meal, which felt like a significant achievement. Her laugh was low and real and came from somewhere unguarded, and each time it happened the table around them noticed, in the pleased way that a community notices when someone they love is genuinely happy. After the feast, Bagrak did speak to him. They stood outside the feast house in the dark, the valley quiet around them and the stars dense overhead. Bagrak had a cup of mead but did not drink from it, which Owen read as the sign it was. My daughter, Bagrak said, has not laughed like that in 2 years. Since before the border trouble, Owen waited. She is not an easy person, Bagrak said. You will know this already. She decides things fast and she does not retreat from them, and she has very little patience for anything she considers dishonest. He looked at Owen over the cup. She has decided something about you. I know, Owen said. I have decided something about her. Tell me, Bagrak said simply. Owen thought about it for a moment, about the courtyard and the key and the carving and the yard in the dark and the morning light and the road through the pass, and he said, she is the most honest person I have ever met. She tested me for a week before she trusted me, and that was entirely right of her. She has more strength than anyone in that Inns County, including the Lord who held her, and she carried it without using it as a weapon unless someone made it necessary. I did not plan to feel what I feel. I do not think she did either, but I am here and I intend to stay if she and you both find it acceptable. Bagrak was quiet for a long moment. The valley breathed around them. She will run your life if you let her, he said finally, which was not precisely what Owen had been expecting. She has been running her own since before I met her, Owen said. I do not need to run it. I would like to be part of it. Something in Bagrak's expression settled. Not softened, he was not a man who softened, but found resolution, the way a strong structure settles into its foundations. He drank from his cup. "There is work in this valley," he said. "The Greenville's forest land on the western slope has needed a proper keeper for 3 seasons. The man we had before went to live with his daughter's family in the coast country." He looked at Owen directly. "A gamekeeper's work, mostly. Some guidance on the deer herd management. You would report to the clan council, which means you would report to me." Owen kept his face measured. "I would be glad of it," he said, with the truth of it held as carefully as he could manage, "if the offer stands properly." Bagrak's eyes did something that on a less mountainous face would have been a smile. "The offer is not from me," he said. "It was my daughter's suggestion which I am choosing to agree with. She suggested it before we left the inn's county." He finished his mead. "Come inside. There is more food." Owen stood in the dark for a moment after Bagrak went back through the feast house door, and he put his hand in his coat pocket and found the small carved deer still there, warm from a day against his side, and he closed his fingers around it. She had thought of it before the pass, before the valley, before the feast. She had gone to her father's settlement already knowing what she wanted to ask. The understanding of it moved through him in a way that was larger than what he had words for, the particular, profound, specific feeling of being wanted. Not in the abstract, not politely, not with conditions. Wanted the way she had kissed him in the yard in the dark. Wanted with the same straightforward, undeniable honesty that she brought to everything. He went back inside. She was at the table with Marat's wife and 2 of the clan's younger warriors, listening to something that was apparently a very involved story about a trading dispute involving a goat, and she looked up when he came back through the door, and her face did the warm open thing, the thing she had stopped trying to conceal. He crossed the hall to her, and she made room for him beside her on the bench with the automatic ease of someone who had already decided exactly where he belonged. He sat. Her shoulder settled against his. One of the warriors was telling the goat story's next development with dramatic emphasis. Marat's wife was laughing. Owen leaned close to Bagrak's ear and said very quietly, "Your father offered me the western slope." She kept her eyes forward and kept her expression even. "Did he?" she said. "You suggested it before we left," Owen said, "before you even kissed me in the yard." Now she turned to look at him, and the expression was caught, not quite embarrassed, but something close, which on Bagrak Wildheart was as rare as a summer snow and just as striking. Then it shifted into something honest and unguarded. "I decided on day 4, she said simply. "What did you decide?" he asked, though he already knew. "That you were mine," she said, without a shade of apology, with that Greenville directness that cut through everything and left only the exact truth standing. "And that I was going to arrange things accordingly." Owen looked at her. She looked back. Around them the feast house was warm and loud and alive, and the great stringed instrument was playing something slower now, and the fire in the central hearth sent its heat across the whole long room. "All right," he said. "I am yours." He paused. "That is also, for clarity, how I feel about it." She reached across and put her hand over his on the table, the same deliberate gesture as the well's edge. And then she turned back to the table and rejoined the goat story with a comment that made Marat's wife howl with laughter. And Owen sat beside her in the warmth of everything she had arranged and felt, for the first time in a long time, completely and specifically where he was supposed to be. Later, when the feast had thinned to the last die-hard storytellers, and the fire had settled to coals, they walked out of the feast house together into the valley's night. The stars were extraordinary from down here, the way they always are in a place with no competing light, and the green river could be heard in the dark, steady and low, the sound the valley made when it was resting. They walked to the river's near bank and stood at the water's edge. The current moved silver-dark beneath them. Owen had his coat on and she had a heavy clan cloak over her warrior's vest, and they stood at the same comfortable shoulder-touch distance they had held all through the feast, which had stopped being careful and started being natural somewhere around the 3rd hour of the journey through the pass. The western slope, Owen said. "What kind of deer does it run?" "Red deer and roe both," she said. "The red deer herd on the upper ridge has been unmanaged since before the border trouble. It needs someone who can count them properly and work out the sustainable cull." She paused. "Also, there is a poacher family on the south edge who have been taking too much. I expect you to use your judgment." "Whether the rule is a weapon or not," he said. "Exactly," she said. He looked at the river. "I have never kept a clan's wood before." "You have never done half the things you have done in the last 8 days," she said, with a dry precision that was already one of his favorite things. "You seem to manage." He laughed quietly. Then he turned toward her, and she was already turned toward him. She had the same knack he had, the hunter's instinct that told you before you looked what direction a thing had moved, and they were very close in the dark with the river running and the stars overhead and the feast house warm behind them. "I want to say something," he said. "Say it," she said. "I have spent most of my life being the person in the room that no one needed to account for," he said slowly, because it was true, and it was the kind of true that was slightly difficult to say. "Not poorly treated, just not particularly seen, not particular to anyone." He held her gaze. "I want you to know what it is, what it actually is to be seen by you, to have been chosen by you specifically. It is the best thing that has happened to me, and I am not going to treat it as anything less than that." She looked at him in the dark, and her expression was the widest open it had ever been. No armor, no assessment, no careful calibration. Just her, amber-eyed and real and closer than she needed to be. "Owen Archer," she said, with enormous deliberateness, "I spent a week taking you apart to find out if you were worth what you appeared to be. I do not waste that kind of attention. Everything I found I kept, and everything I kept I want." She reached up and put her palm against his jaw, the same gesture as the inn-yard, but softer now, without the urgency of midnight. "You are particular to me. You have been since day 4. And you are going to be particular to me for a very long time, so you may as well stop being surprised by it." He turned his face slightly into her hand, and she let him, and then he put his arms around her, and she came into them with the definitive ease of something completing a shape it was made for, her arms going around him and her face turning into his neck for a moment, her breath warm against his skin, and he held her close and did not say anything because there was nothing left that needed saying. The river ran steady in the dark. Above them, the stars were thick and fixed and permanent over the green valley. The ironworks were banked for the night, and the feast house had quieted to murmuring, and somewhere in the far dark a night bird was calling its single repeated note into the cold, clean air. And Owen Archer held Bagrak Wildheart on the bank of the river that gave her clan its name, and felt the specific gravity of a life that had just, quietly and completely, changed its direction. After a long moment she lifted her head and looked at him, and the moonlight caught the copper rings in her braids, and she said, with the directness he had fallen in love with before he had a name for it, "There is an orc custom. When a Greenville woman decides on her person, she gives them something from her own hands. I gave you the carving." Owen went still. "The deer on the landing," he said. "You made that." "I made it," she said, "and you picked it up, which in the custom means you accepted what it was." He pulled back just enough to see her face fully. "Did I agree to something I did not know I was agreeing to?" "You agreed to be considered," she said. "The rest required the conversation we just had." He looked at her, her steady eyes and the scar and the copper rings and all the particular details of her that he had been accumulating for a week with the same care he gave the forest, the small signs that told the whole story, and he said, "I would have agreed to more than that if you had simply asked." "I know," she said. "That is why I did not simply ask. You needed to choose it properly." "And did I," he said, "choose it properly?" She looked at him for one long, warm, certain moment. "Yes," she said. And then she kissed him again, there on the river bank under the stars, slow and deliberate and warm, and he kissed her back with everything he had, which was not a small amount, and the night held them both, and the valley kept its long green quiet, and the river ran on.